Hello and welcome to 4K Gaming and Tutorials. This is our first video on a new series called Maximize Your PC, and it seems only logical since everything in the computer connects to the motherboard that we should do the motherboard first, right? So that's what we're going to do. The motherboard here, this is, we have one from AMD and Intel. We're going to start off with the AMD because it looks more, the orientation of this picture is more up and down, like you would. Sorry about all the flickering here because I can't really move the mouse without it hovering over something. But anyway, the orientation is more like what you'd see it when you're working in the computer, because for some reason the Intel screenshots, except for this one, the overview is kind of sideways. So, and that one's a little far off anyway. We'll get to that later. What the basic layout here is, you have your I/O ports over here. This is what you're going to be plugging in all of your stuff into the back of your computer for your mouse, USB, optical audio. You have a few buttons there we'll get to in a minute, all of your USB ports, eSATA, your network Ethernet cables, and all of your video card integrated audio. So what the basic layout here is, this is a MOSFET right here. It helps cool, but it does get in the way sometimes, so you might want to, depending on the size of your case, it might get in the way, because I know I actually have both of these motherboards, so I've built with them, and the MOSFET right here gets insanely in the way when you're trying to top mount a radiator for your water cooler. So yeah, just be aware of that when you're looking. This is the CPU socket. This is where your CPU goes, and then your CPU cooler will go on top of it. These are your DIMM slots for your RAM. Each computer will have a, each motherboard, sorry, will have a different number or maybe orientation, but they're usually somewhere near the CPU for proximity, so they can transfer memory faster, transfer data faster over the memory. What you have up here in the little 8/8s that you see there that light up with LED, that's where your fault codes will be. It'll be launching up, and if it has a fault, then it will say like FF or whatever it hangs on will be there, and you look in the manual to try and see what it is. Here we have your start button. This is how you would start it if you don't have your USB headers down here. Oh, sorry, USB. Your front case panel headers. This is your reset, where you would reset it. Yeah, kind of like restart. You have a go to BIOS button here. I don't know if they call it that on ASUS, but I know that's what it's called in MSI. It might just be like a go key or something. But then you have right here your power supply. This is where your 24 pin on the power supply goes to power the motherboard, and then it will distribute stuff to like the fan headers that you find up here, and it also has extra 12 volt and an 8 pin right here to where you can use for overclocking stability. And you'll notice you have different fan headers, like right there above the DIMM slot you have 2. And then you have one over here next to that the kind of 4-pin thing. It looks like a plug. I'm not really sure what that's called, honestly. I've never really had reason to use them, but that's where one of your fan headers is. And you also have some down here you'll see that are labeled right there. CHA, which is a chassis, 1 and 2 fan, and then these right here in the corner are your front case panel headers, to where you'd plug that in. That handles your power button mainly. Then we have a different button down here. It is called a digikey. I've never really used this before, but what I can deduce from it would be that it's for the UEFI BIOS, so especially since this is right next to the fast boot. Turn the fast boot switch on and off, and that's what controls your UEFI for 8, 8.1, and 10. Then we have your USB headers over here. These are USB 2 headers because your USB 3 header is over here. That's what you use for your front case panel, and you can use this one for if your front case panel doesn't have USB 3 or 3.1. Then we have all of your PCIe slots. Then your board might have different one of these depending. There are some different boards that have, depending on the sizes come in EATX, ATX, and micro ATX, and micro ITX, or mini ITX. So depending on how big the board is, like this one is an ATX board. Most server ones will be bigger than this, and most like smaller PCs and like really small budget builds will have like a mini ITX, and they'll be like maybe just as big as this right here where the mouse is. So depending on how much they can fit in there, then that'll pretty much tell you how many PCI slots it has, and sometimes how much RAM it is. It's usually specific to the motherboard, but the most common type is ATX. So we have 16X slots, and most of these will be either listed somewhere in the description down here somewhere. I don't actually think this one listed. It might be in the description or the product information. It's a good thing to look that up too, because that can be very performance bottleneck kind of. I don't know how else you would put that, but it can definitely hinder your performance if you're trying to run games on a 1X card, which is what these little tiny slots are here, instead of making them run on a 4X or higher. And this particular board has 3 8X. It can run triple SLI or quadruple SLI, I think. No, I'm sorry. It's only triple. Triple SLI and 8X, or double SLI or Crossfire. Crossfire too. I have never really had any AMD or HDI cards, but Crossfire and SLI are kind of the same technology, but they have differences. That's not really what this video is about though. So then it depends on how much data is traveling through, whether it's 8X or 16X, and all these will be listed in the PCIe slots part of the manual that comes with your motherboard, so you know exactly where to put them and what configuration and all that. But this little battery thing right here, it's a little disk battery. That's what keeps your motherboard on slightly enough to be able to store your BIOS, not your BIOS. Yeah, sorry, it's your BIOS, or there was CMOS. There we go. Sorry, I had a little bit of a brain fart, but yeah, that's the battery that takes your CMOS. If you take that out and use the little jumper up here, I'm not sure if you can see that from the. There is no other picture that shows that, but there is a little jumper up here that's just behind the DIMM slot there. You put the jumper on the other 2 pins, take that battery out, and that will clear your CMOS. So that's what that little battery there is for. And then the SPDIF is what you use for your speaker and the audio in the board. And the op fan is another fan header. And you also have, you can't see because of the shining, but it's a Supreme FX3 on this board, and the little lines that run the length here will light up when the board is power on, and you can use this for design and RGB lighting effects. So you know, if you want a case mod theme and a whole bunch of RGB lighting to go out throughout your board, then you can set these with that and make it all light up together. Of course, it wouldn't help if you get it a red board like this. They also have different color schemes for other ones, But if you have a red scheme, you know, this lights up red, and then you have other red components, you can order custom cables and all that too, so that's pretty interesting. But looking here on the back, we have some Republic of Gamers. This is ASUS Republic of Gamers Crosshair V Formula Z. They have your clear CMOS button right here. You can use as a little speedy way to do that, but that's how you do a hard reset of it, what I was explaining just a few minutes ago. So this little button here is for ROG Connect. So you can take, let's see, this one is white USB, is not a regular USB. It connects to the board's BIOS, and you can connect the ROG Connect cable to another computer. It runs the ROG Connect software, press this button, and you can real-time control the BIOS settings without actually being in the BIOS on this board. So that's a really good feature for overclocking. You know, just little features like that make these boards a little bit unique. So you can pretty much do it for whatever you want. If you want an insane gaming board but you don't have enough money to put all $1,000 into a extreme like Intel build, or like a pile driver, you don't want to use that much electricity but you still want the performance, overclocking is good, just as long as you don't blow anything up. It's good to exercise caution while overclocking. But then you have the little fan headers up here. Those are also good for overclocking. Those are really good for improving the overall system performance, but most of the people that do it are gamers looking for extra performance. Normally, if you just need an average use computer, you won't have a board like this. You'll probably have a board maybe closer to this. It would probably be under $100 if it's just for like web browsing or casual surfing. But if you want something like more of a NAS server, they do have server motherboards that are EATX, so you can do that. And also you want to make sure that the chipset on the motherboard is this thing right here, 990FX, and that matches up with the processor that you get. Or either most of the time it's limited by socket type, but you also won't get the maximum amount of performance if you get a processor that is below the maximum supported on the motherboard, and vice versa. So you want to make sure you get all of the corresponding parts, and a really good site for this, if you're making your first build, is PC Part Picker. It'll help you with compatibility issues and making sure you get all the right parts. And I think it actually has something where you can make sure you don't forget anything. But yeah, the Intel side of it is just a little bit of comparison. Under this shield right here is all the pins. The pins for AMD are little holes right here because the pins are in the processor, and Intel puts their pins in the board, which is why that's covered up. They also make sure that the what do you call it, the retention arms, they have double retention arms to make sure that it's evenly spread and makes good contact, which I guess is a pretty good move. I'm not sure why they need two of them. It's probably because there isn't anything for the board to latch onto, because when you undo this retention arm, it will slide back and then slide in and lock those pins into place, and the pins are in the board instead of in the processor. Kind of just answered that for myself. But anyway, this one has more supported memory because it has 8 DIMM slots instead of 4, and they're on either side of the board. And you have a little bit of MOSFET up there with your 4-pin and your fan headers and all that. We'll go over here for a little bit more overview. It kind of looks a little weird turned sideways like that, so I usually don't look at these as much as we do these. And oh yeah, sorry, when I was going over the overview I kind of skipped into the design with the RGB lights, but one thing I forget to mention is these little things on the side here are your SATA ports, and it also has SATA Express on this board, which is what these little things are. It look kind of like if you could see the connectors right around in here, and they're supposed to be better, but they're not as mainstream or widely used. Not sure why, because they offer better performance, but I guess if it doesn't catch, it doesn't catch. But you can't really even see it on the screenshots of this board. So I suppose it's just as well, but that's what these little red things are here. If you were wondering, they are SATA. They have 8, 4, and then 4 on the bottom plus the top. And then this one, same thing, 4 plus 4. And then you have your SATA Express. You have roughly the same thing here, although the pictures for this aren't as good, so you can't really tell what everything is labeled from these pictures, which is another reason why I use the AMD motherboard. But then you have the AMD motherboards and processors have only been able to run DDR3 up until the recent release of Ryzen, which has brought them up to DDR4, which was one of the major things about the RAM and everything. But you also want to make sure that you get the right RAM that goes with your processor and everything. To my knowledge, it doesn't matter what the DDR or rate is on the motherboard itself, but you also want to make sure that it has the correct number of pins when you match it up with your RAM. So that's pretty much it. You just want to make sure that you get the right size board for your case. You want to make sure everything matches up with the chipset. You want to make sure that you have the right socket type. I almost forgot about socket type. You have different socket types. Here you can see socket AMD3. So this is an AMD3 or 3 Plus motherboard, and this is an LGA 1151. So you have this, and basically the socket type is for the corresponding boards and everything for the chipsets and different processors in their lines respectively. So you need to make sure that you match up that. It can be a major drag if you get an LGA 2011 and you have an LGA 1151 processor. That would be very bad. You want to make sure that you use that and check it with PC Part Picker. And that's pretty much it. Keep in mind what you want it to do, what you want it to be, a server or gaming or whatnot. Keep in mind this throughout the entire build, but especially when you're picking what every other part in the build will connect to, which is the motherboard. And our next video will be on processors. We'll go through how all the different processors match up and what the best one might be for different gaming needs. Different servers, or whatever casual browsing you might do. And that's pretty much it. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of these next. Dang, it's really cold in here. The sun's already gone down and I still have the window open, but yeah, make sure you subscribe. Make sure you hit that like button. Leave a comment down what kind of motherboard you chose for your system or are thinking about, and maybe some other people that are watching the video can chime in down there and give you some pointers and everything. I will try to check when I happen to be on YouTube. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Later, guys.